A 14-month-old boy sits in a room. He is alone, only with a stuffed toy that's his best friend. He doesn't know it yet, or maybe he can't comprehend, but his little life is going to come to an end in the next few hours. Jaidyn Leskie was born April 30th, 1996, in the Australian state of Victoria. At the time of his disappearance and subsequently being found dead, he was living in the suburb of Moe, 130 kilometres southeast of Melbourne. Jaidyn's mother is a woman named Belinda Murphy, and his father Brett Leskie. His father Brett was previously married to his mother's sister Katie. When the relationship ended, Belinda and Brett started seeing each other, giving birth to two children, Brianna in 1995 and Jaidyn in 1996. The couple's relationship would soon end after little Jaidyn was born, a similar scenario that had played out years earlier with Belinda's older sister Katie, who Brett ended the relationship with soon after their daughter Shannon was born. Belinda would start a relationship with a new man, Greg Domaszewicz. Greg was a local car mechanic known to Belinda through her ex-husband Brett, who worked at the same auto repair shop on Delator Road in town. By April 1997, Belinda and Greg were now a couple, but the relationship was toxic. According to Belinda, Greg never acknowledged their relationship to other people, often referring to her as Leskie's ex-missus. To Belinda, it was as if he was ashamed to be with her, never showing any affection to her in public. But nonetheless, the couple would spend every day together, alternating between each other's houses, often watching movies with her two children. Belinda would later come to find out that Greg was still sleeping with his ex-fiancée, a woman named Yvonne Penfold. Yvonne and Greg also had a toxic relationship that lasted several years, periodically taking out restraining orders against each other. Greg had connections to future head figures in Melbourne's underworld by way of notorious drug kingpin Carl Williams. Greg was a lover of animals, owning 3 Staffordshire Bull Terriers, Jack, Sam and Shep. While he was with Yvonne, he raised a baby piglet into a full-size pig that he called Stimpy. Greg would later claim that after an argument with Yvonne, that she took Stimpy to the slaughterhouse, bringing him home in finely wrapped newspaper, storing him in the fridge. During his relationship with Belinda, Greg would ask to babysit little Jaidyn at his house. He claimed that he didn't trust his sister Katie's usual babysitter, a woman named Julie Brasington. He said that on a few occasions she was negligent in her duty of care, stating that baby Jaidyn's sister Brianna had accidentally gotten shampoo in his eyes, and Julie had failed to wash it off properly. By June 14th, 1997, according to Belinda, Greg had looked after Jaidyn a total of 10 times. At first she was hesitant to leave her baby with him, but over time had developed trust. But things hadn't gone exactly perfect to plan on some of those occasions Greg looked after Jaidyn. A few times when Jaidyn was returned to Belinda, he had noticeable injuries, scratches, scrapes, bumps and open cuts. Jaidyn was known to be a sensitive baby. He would cry for hours at a time. It was noted by several people that Greg would become frustrated with him, pushing him over, leaving him in a dark room or outside with the dogs if his crying was bothering him. And if the noise of his crying wasn't drowned out, he would simply turn up the TV. 3 major incidences happened in the lead up to Saturday, June 14th. On one of the first times Greg was left unsupervised with Jaidyn, he had shaved the front of his head to resemble a receding hairline like his. Alarm bells rang immediately between Belinda and her sister Katie. They felt childless Greg was trying to make Jaidyn look like him. But things from this point on took a more disturbing turn. While Greg was putting Jaidyn in the car to return him to Belinda, frustrated with his non-stop crying, Greg allegedly smacked the baby's head against the car, splitting his lip. On another occasion, whilst fishing near Blue Rock Dam with Jaidyn and a friend, Greg accidentally dropped him over a fence they were attempting to climb. This resulted in Jaidyn receiving a bloodied nose and scrapes to his face. But Greg would lie to Belinda and tell her that Jaidyn had wandered off and fell down some stairs. So on Saturday the 14th, Belinda and her sister Katie had organised a babysitter as they had a friend's birthday party to attend. But when Greg found out about it, he insisted that he take care of Jaidyn, at least during the afternoon. Reluctantly, Belinda agreed and set about packing a blue plastic shopping bag with an assortment of clothes and nappies needed for the few hours Jaidyn would be with Greg. At 12:15 p.m, Belinda called Greg to come pick her up from her house on Lincoln Street. The plan was to ferry her and her two kids to her sister Katie's house on nearby Hawker Street, where her kids would be babysat by sitter Julie along with Katie's two children. From here, Greg would take Jaidyn to his house on Narragain Drive for what was intended to be only a few hours. The weather had been cold and rained on and off, so when Greg returned home, there was a slight break in the weather, so he placed Jaidyn in the garage under cover and jacked up his car to fix the rattling exhaust pipe that had been banging against the rear bumper bar. So as Greg is working under the car to repair the exhaust pipe, he had been mindful of the jack's positioning, ensuring that it didn't release, lowering the car on top of him. Back at Belinda's sister Katie's house, the women are having pre-drinks before their night out. Greg had given Belinda an extra $70 and told her to have a good night, so the pair had started early. By 4 p.m, noticing the rain had come back, Belinda called Greg to ask him to bring Jaidyn back to her sister's house. She was concerned that Jaidyn needed more clothes. She knew Greg would have been working on his car in the rain and was worried Jaidyn had gotten wet. Greg would tell her not to worry and that he was about to shower little Jaidyn and bring him right over. But before the call ended, Greg told Belinda that his friend Darren Farr had told him that her sister Katie had said that Greg was going to kill him before Christmas, which according to Greg was a total lie, and he and Darren had sorted it out. When Belinda got off the phone to Greg, she confronted her sister and a massive argument ensued. She grabbed her daughter Brianna's hand and left the house, walking the roughly 15 minutes in the rain back to her place. From 5:30 p.m. to 7:45, Belinda made as many as 20 attempts to contact Greg by phone, but was unsuccessful. She wanted to tell him that the party was off and to bring Jaidyn to her place and not her sister Katie's. But during this time, Katie had called Belinda and the pair had made up, resuming their previous plans for the night. At 8 p.m, Katie and her boyfriend picked up Belinda, dropping Brianna off to the babysitter back on Hawker Street before heading into town. The first stop was a house party in the suburb of Traralgon, which was a 25-minute drive from Mo. The attendees would spend several hours at the house before walking the few minutes to Ryan's Hotel in the centre of town. Arriving at 11 p.m, Belinda immediately went to the hotel's public phone to call Greg to check on little Jaidyn. This time Greg answered, but the news wasn't good. He said that Jaidyn had burned his little backside on the heater inside the house and had to be taken to hospital where they applied some burn cream. Unsatisfied with his care, he decided to take him to a different hospital in Maryvale. Immediately, Belinda wanted to return home and asked Greg to come pick her up, to which Greg told her to stay and have a good time and to call him back later. After the phone call, Belinda went to her sister Katie and relayed what Greg had told her about Jaidyn being burnt. Katie immediately thought Greg was playing a sick practical joke, something he had done in the past, and went over to the hotel's phone and called Greg herself. She would return minutes later, telling Belinda that it was in fact a joke, and Greg had insisted that she stay and have a good time. Unsettled by the interaction, and with no way home, Belinda reluctantly stayed, and continued drinking into the early hours of the morning. At 2 a.m, Belinda made another phone call to Greg, asking him to come pick her up, and this time he would leave his house and travel the almost 30 minutes to Traralgon. But as Greg was leaving the house, unaware danger was lurking outside, hiding in the bushes across the road was his ex-fiance's older brother Kenny Penfold and a friend Darren Wilson, who was also once engaged to Kenny's sister Yvonne. The pair had watched Greg drive off down the dark street before enacting their devious plan. Sometime around 2:30 a.m, Greg arrives to Ryan's Hotel in Traralgon. Immediately when Belinda got into the car, she noticed Jaidyn wasn't in the baby seat and asked where he was. Greg replied that he had told her that he was in hospital. Confused, believing Greg had been joking about the hospital visit earlier in the night, she demanded to be taken to the hospital to see her son, to which Greg stated that because she was so drunk, hospital staff might think she was a bad mother. Instead, Greg handed Belinda a bourbon and coke, encouraging her to drink it, reassuring her that he had the situation handled. By 3 a.m, the couple arrived back to Greg's house on Narracan Drive to a gruesome scene. His front window was smashed, and there was a pig's head sitting on the lawn. Greg immediately knew this was the doing of his ex Yvonne, and after Belinda and Greg entered the house, Greg called Yvonne at 3:09 a.m. The call lasted a total of 17 seconds, with Belinda hearing Greg yell down the phone that this was one of her sick games, a clear reminder of when Yvonne had allegedly killed his pet pig Stimpy. Greg would drive Belinda back to her house on Lincoln Street, taking a detour past Yvonne's house, where they noticed the cars in the driveway and the lights to the house on, but they didn't stop. Sometime after 3:20 a.m, Belinda, now at home, exhausted and intoxicated from the night out, fell asleep on the floor in the living room in front of the heater. The last thing she remembers is Greg telling her that he was going to find out who damaged his house. Within minutes of Greg leaving Belinda's house, he was pulled over by police for a random alcohol breath test. After producing a negative blood alcohol reading, he was allowed to leave. But during his interaction with the officer, he never mentioned the damage to his house, or anything about Jaidyn Leskie. At 5 a.m, Belinda is shaken awake by a panicked Greg. He tells her that he had lied about Jaidyn being in the hospital and that he had been kidnapped. According to Greg, he believed that his ex-fiancée Yvonne and her brother had damaged his house, and in the process, noticing little Jaidyn asleep on the lounge, took him. Belinda, confused, asked why Greg failed to say anything earlier when they were at his house, and why he had left Jaidyn home alone for the almost 1 hour return trip to Traralgon. He said he didn't want to wake him up and put him in a baby seat in the cold car, and when they returned to his house, noticing the damage and Jaidyn missing, he didn't want to alarm her that there was a potential problem. When he had left Belinda's house at 3:30 a.m, upon arriving back to his house, he and his dog searched inside for Jaidyn but couldn't find him. At that time, he said, he believed that Jaidyn may have woken up and wandered off, hiding somewhere in the house. It was only after an extensive search that he realised that Jaidyn had been kidnapped. At 5:18 a.m. on Sunday, June 15th, Belinda and Greg walked into Moe Police Station to report a missing baby. As fate would have it, the senior constable at the counter was the same officer who pulled Greg over for the random breath test only hours earlier. Upon relaying the information to the officer, the pair were separated and taken into opposing interview rooms. The officer in charge was Sergeant Maxwell Hill. He would interview Greg first, who would give conflicting and often confusing statements about the night's chain of events. Upon the sergeant leaving the room to interview Belinda, he turned the air conditioner on and closed the door, as to muffle the sounds coming from the opposing interview room that housed Belinda. During his interview with Belinda Murphy, Sergeant Hill could hear the door being opened from the other interview room, and when he went to investigate, found that Greg had turned the AC off and was attempting to eavesdrop on what Belinda was saying to the officers. After this occurred several times, Sergeant Hill was of the opinion that they may have a homicide on their hands and notified the homicide squad. During Sergeant Hill's interview with Greg Domaszewicz, he secretly voice recorded his responses. Upon Belinda and Greg's release from the police station, Greg embraced Belinda with a big hug and was crying in front of the officers. He openly told them that he wanted the police to find his girlfriend's baby, which was the first time Greg had shown any affection to Belinda in front of company, or even admitted to anyone that she was actually his girlfriend. Over the next several days, with homicide detectives having taken over the case, official videotaped interviews were conducted. A search of his home and car was carried out. Under the mattress in his bedroom, $600 in cash was found drying out. In the boot of his car were several belongings, most notably a roll of tape. On the passenger floor of his vehicle was a wet wallet and jacket. Police managed to track down Kenny Penfold and Darren Wilson. They owned up to trashing Greg's house but denied any involvement with Jaidyn Leskie. In fact, police were able to corroborate their story with other teens in the area. After Kenny and Darren left Greg's house, they were seen jumping out of bushes and scaring other kids in the area. Not a move two people would do if they had just kidnapped a child. But besides that, nobody saw them with a baby. Kenny and Darren would tell the police that they saw Greg walk out of his house and put something in his rubbish bin before leaving in his car. The police had found bloody tissues in the bin with Jaidyn's blood on them. Given Greg's conflicting, avoiding and often changing statements to the police, Greg Domaszewicz, now the prime suspect, was arrested and charged with murder almost 4 weeks after Jaidyn's disappearance on July 16, 1997. On New Year's Day 1998, 2 campers near Blue Rock Dam made a gruesome discovery. Floating in the water looked to be a dead baby. Police were called and it was discovered to be Jaidyn Leskie. Police divers would enter the water, finding baby's clothes, a sleeping bag and a crowbar. An autopsy revealed that Jaidyn Leskie had died of head injuries. He had a broken arm that had been crudely wrapped in tape as if to attempt to reset the bone back together. In his system was the drug benzexol, commonly used to treat Parkinson's disease or schizophrenia. Greg Domaszewicz's trial started in March of 1998, with key evidence missing such as the tape found in the boot of Greg's car during the police search, which could have linked to the tape wrapped around Jaidyn's broken arm. This case was going to be hard to convict. His lawyer did a good job at adding reasonable doubt, citing the Pighead Gang, as the media dubbed them, as potential suspects, and given that doubt, on the 4th of December that year, Greg Domaszewicz would be found not guilty of the murder of Jaidyn Leskie. But in the aftermath, a lot of things would happen. Greg would be linked to underworld hitman Andrew Benji Vienneman. In fact, the day he was murdered on March 23, 2004, Greg was the last phone call he received. A 2006 coronial inquest would take place at the behest of Jaidyn Leskie's parents, Brett and Belinda. The judge ruled that Greg Domaszewicz did in fact dump Jaidyn's body in the Blue Rock Dam, but fell short of finding him guilty of murder. In 2011, Victoria would change the double jeopardy laws for serious crimes, stating that if new compelling evidence was brought before prosecutors, a person could be retrialled again for the same crime. But what do the detectives believe happened on the 14th of June, way back in 1997? Well, here's the breakdown. Police believe while Greg was working on his car, he stepped away for a moment. Jaidyn, wandering around, ended up under the car when Greg's faulty jack released and the car landed on him. Panicked, Greg took him inside and tried to bandage his broken arm with masking tape. Screaming in pain, he crushed up the drug benzexol and fed it to him. But this had little effect. According to a prisoner who claimed Greg confessed to him, he then put a sleeping bag over Jaidyn's head and hit him with the crowbar. Initially, Greg left his house around midnight and drove over to Belinda's with the body of her son. Neighbours noted hearing his unique sounding car with the rattling exhaust pipe around that time. Using the key given to him by Belinda, he entered her property, placing him in the cot. His plan was to get Belinda as drunk as possible and frame her for her own son's murder. But after finding his house trashed by Kenny Penfold and Darren Wilson, he decided to change plans and instead frame Jaidyn's disappearance as a kidnapping. Sometime after dropping Belinda off, he collected Jaidyn from his cot, noticeably leaving the freshly cleaned and made bedspread a mess. It was here when he drove to Blue Rock Dam, a short 15-minute drive away, and walking Jaidyn into the river, sunk his little body to the bottom, wetting his wallet and his clothes in the process. But that's just the police theory. We may never know for sure. Greg Domaszewicz to this day is still out and living his best life, but he does have the changes to the double jeopardy laws looming over his head. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments.